Chapter 11. Family and Fans. Being the brain was always easy for me to do. But who is the brain? The brain is not smart. He's a manager of wrestlers and a flim-flam man. He's the kind of guy that if you invite him for the weekend, he'll stay for a month. He'll go through your drawers while you're not home, just to see if he can find anything on you that he can use later. If you go out to dinner with him, he'll claim that he left his wallet in his other jacket or other pants. Or he'd claim that he sent a $500 money order to Guam to take care of that orphanage full of kids. The brain used to say, "I'd love to have this guy to manage. Boy, could I make this guy money." For example, he'd invest all of Blackjack Lanza's money into a fertilizer farm and say he thought it would do better. He tells everyone that he has Rolls Royces in Beverly Hills but rides his bike to the mailbox every day. He doesn't even live in Beverly Hills, but very close to it. He has a gold Rolex, but it's not real gold, nor is it a real Rolex. The brain will cheat and lie. He'll be everyone's friend, but he'll backstab them, always smiling to their faces. If you make him mad, he'll tell you what he thinks, knowing he has a way out the Bill Clinton of wrestling. He's truly a weasel. He's kind of a combination of a dangerous used car salesman and a movie agent who does nothing but porn films. In the WWF, I had opportunities to really develop the brain gimmick. The WWF decided to have me do a photo shoot out in Beverly Hills for their magazine to show where the brain lived. We went from house to house and all we saw were Rolls Royces. That just didn't seem right. We drove by one place and saw an Edsel in a driveway. It was perfect. Working up some tears, I told the lady at the house, "Excuse me, my uncle had an Edsel just like that, and he was killed in it. I was wondering if we could take some pictures of it." "Oh, please help yourself," she said. We took pictures throughout her house for about 3 hours. If you really want to know how the brain works and how smug he can be, I was in Japan to buy a silk screen. My wife wanted this specific type. There was a guy in Japan named George Silk who sold them. He had a reputation as a real hard guy to bargain with, but the boys told me that if I got him a bottle of whiskey and got him drunk, he would forget everything and I could get everything for almost nothing. So the brain went in to see George Silk. The brain talked to him for about an hour as George brought out every silk screen he had. They were all starting to look alike. I said, "Let's have a bottle of whiskey and think about this." I got the bottle out and started pouring. I was watching him sell. The brain poured him another. The brain had another. By the end of the day, we made our deal. I paid him the money, and he promised to ship them home to me. I called my wife later. "I'm so proud of myself. I got the silk screen you wanted and I got it real cheap. And I got that other silk screen you wanted too." I described the screen to her and she said, "I didn't want that one." George Silk had gotten the brain drunk and sold me 2 silk screens, convincing me that I needed it. I thought I paid $300 for one. I paid $1,000 for 2. And they weren't even the ones she wanted. And what would the brain be without his family? I called any group I managed the Bobby Heenan family. I never used the term stable or anything like that. I picked family because of what was going on with Charles Manson at the time. The Assassins, Joe Tommaso, and Guy Mitchell, were the first tag team I managed. Guy is still a real good friend of mine. He once wrestled as my brother, Guy Heenan, in Terre Haute, Indiana. I honestly don't remember it, but others have reminded me of it. Joe is a tough little guy from Canada who used to wrestle down south as the Bat. I hit it off with Blackjack Lanza the first day I met him. It was just one of those things. We made each other laugh and became the best of friends. Every time I was out of town for Thanksgiving, Jack always had me over for dinner with his family. Harley Race is a terrific guy. We had a lot of laughs. I managed Harley in the AWA for about a month or so and then again in the WWF when he was the king. But I never managed him at his peak, when he was the NWA champion. Baron von Raschke is a jewel. I always hoped my daughter would marry a guy like him, and I hope all her kids are like him. He's just a decent man. And he's the best worker in the world because he made people mad, yet he does not have one mean bone in his body. Whether he drank 1 beer or 100, it was the same effect. He was sipping on some Boone's Farm wine once when we were walking out of a hotel. It was icy on that day, and Baron stepped on a patch of ice while taking a drink out of the bottle. He flipped in the air and landed on his back. I thought he was dead. Baron got up and brushed himself off. He took one look at the bottle of Boone's Farm and said, "Wow, what a kick." It was fun to manage Ernie Ladd. He wore plaid clothes, suspenders, and a big crown to the ring. He played football in the NFL and had the best stories. He would always sit in the dressing rooms, taping his knees, which had so many scars on them from all the operations he had. Back then, the promoters would always take their time getting the transportation money to the wrestlers. Ernie would ask for it, but the promoters wanted to add it to his check. Ernie didn't trust them. He wanted his money first. As he was slowly, and I mean slowly, taping his legs, the promoter would say, "Come on, Ernie. Let's go." It was time for his match. "I haven't seen my money yet," he'd say without even looking up. By the time he'd get done taping his knees, they'd be there with his money. He put his money in his sock, laced his boot, and went out to the ring. The Valiant brothers were a complete waste of my time. Blackjack Mulligan, whose real name is Bob Windham, was a big guy, about 6 feet 8 inches and 300 pounds. He was in Minneapolis as a referee and got a break to go to New York. Vince McMahon Sr. said, "I'm going to make you a cowboy." When Lanza and I came back from Japan, Mulligan approached Lanza and said, "I hope you don't mind. I'm going to be a cowboy." "I don't care," said Jack. "I'm also going to have a black hat," said Mulligan. "I don't care. I'm also going to wear a black glove." "Anybody can wear black gloves," Lanza informed him. "They're also going to call me Blackjack Mulligan," Windham said. "You have the right to use any name you want." Jack pointed to me. "You want him to?" "Nah, I think I can get over by myself," Mulligan said. "Do you mean?" Jack said. "You stole everything but the name Lanza. I managed Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens in 1974. My God, did I learn from them. I learned not to talk to Nick in more than 2 sentences because he would go on and confuse you. If you ask Nick what time it is, he tells you how to build a watch. If I'm going to the electric chair, I want Nick to be the preacher who talks to me. I'll die of old age before I get to the chair. But he means well." Nick, Ray, and I wrestled a 6-man against Vern and Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. I turned to Ray and said, "I didn't get the finish. I forgot it." "I wasn't there when they gave it out," Ray said. "So it's just you and me here, and we don't know the finish?" He said Nick knows enough for both of us. Ray was like Richie Allen, an old pro ball player. They said he was nothing but trouble, drinking and carousing all night. But on the baseball field, which they call between the lines, he was great. Ray was like that. He would stay out all night, and sometimes we couldn't find him for days. But when it came time to be in the ring, he was there. Bobby Duncombe came into the AWA and teamed with Lanza. He was from Texas and played in the minor leagues for the St. Louis Cardinals. He took great bumps and had great acceleration. He is a very nice man who lost his son a couple of years ago. Bobby Duncombe Jr. was a wrestler in WCW. Ken Patera was an athlete and an Olympian. He's a big, tough, strong guy, and he lets everybody know it. He has this personality that he won't take any crap from anyone. He's real loud and boisterous and has caused a lot of his own problems. We've been friends a long time, and he's always been nice to me. In 1988, we worked an angle in the WWF when he came back from his stay in jail. We even had a debate on television. But Vince wouldn't let me call him what I wanted to call him. He had just gotten out of the can, and I was going to have some danishes and coffee on a nearby table during our debate. "Would you like some sticky buns? Would you like some sticky buns?" Vince said, "Don't do that." I didn't. Wrestling Patera was like working with the bear. You knew he was strong. Usually when someone picked me up for a body slam, I would help him. Patera would just pick you up with ease like a forklift. He was that powerful. Vern Gagne always said that Pater would have won the Olympic gold medal in weightlifting if he hadn't been out all night trying to attack the German girls the night before. I managed the Barbarian, who used to look a lot like one of the Road Warriors. When I was with him, he would wear this outfit with reindeer antlers on his head. I never managed a guy with antlers. I stepped in the ring first and sat on the ropes so he could come through. He stepped through the ropes and stood up. The problem was that he hooked me by the balls with the antlers. I screamed, "Put me down. Put me down," as he was trying to stand up with me attached to him. I managed Nikolai Volkov before he was Nikolai Volkov. At the time I managed him in the AWA, he was Boris Brasnikov. He was a big guy from Yugoslavia, but he was real soft-hearted and a good family man. They never used managers in Japan, but I was over there when Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba had a major split. Abdullah the Butcher left Baba and jumped to Inoki. Tiger Jeet Singh left Inoki and went to Baba. Tiger is a Hindu who lives in Toronto. I enjoyed managing him, but not hanging around Japan with him. All he wanted to do was look at cameras all day. They also made me the manager of the Missing Link, It was Dewey Robertson. He painted his face green and had 3 dots of hair on his head. He used to grab what hair he had and run it into the post. We were in New York and had to go to Los Angeles the next day. He asked me, "What time does your plane leave in the morning?" "Around 10 o'clock, I said. "Mine's at 9:15. If you get there around 8:45, that's fine." "For what?" I asked. "To get my ticket. My gimmick is that I don't talk." I told him, "You better start talking tomorrow. I'm only your manager for 10 minutes a night." But with my haircut. "You're in New York," I said. "People will think you had a bad barber. They don't care here. You'll blend in." Rick Rude wasn't as open to my help. He was jealous of everyone and always scared that someone was getting his shot. He felt that he should have been the champion and always in the main event. That was his mentality. We were in Buffalo one night and going 20 miles to Niagara Falls. Rude was getting his rental car. I was going to get a cab. I asked him, "Are you by yourself?" "Yeah," he said. "You want company? I'll pay half the car." He said, "No, I'll go by myself." That was Rick. He was just all for himself. That's the way he wanted to conduct his life and business. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff was a man who could have had it all. He could have been the big babyface under Hogan. He was an athlete and in great condition. But when he tore his bicep and hurt his neck, he suffered nerve damage and was never the same. Another member of my family was King Kong Bundy, or Shamu, as I called him. Steve Hecht from Coliseum Video had a big party in his house in Toronto. He invited Bundy and me to his party, but no one else would come. I thought I'd be nice to the guy and kiss up to him. "What does Bundy like to eat?" he asked me. "He loves Cornish hens," I said. Honestly, I didn't know if that was true. I just made it up. We got to his house. The guy had 75 Cornish hens out with some lunch meat. Bundy had a bologna sandwich. Hecht got stuck with 75 chickens. Adrian Adonis was funny. He used to like his wife to take naked pictures of him. Then, he'd take the film to the local Walgreens to have it developed. He'd call the Walgreens to see if his film was in. He'd ask them, "Would you look in there to see if they're the ones from the bar mitzvah?" Just to get them to look through the pictures. I also managed Haku and Tonga, the Islanders, for a while. They weren't hard to deal with at all. They were very kind, docile, nice people. But if you got them drinking, you'd have a problem. One night in a bar, a guy said something derogatory to Haku. Haku reached in his mouth and broke off the guy's bottom teeth with his fingers. Tully Blanchard got mad at me after he left the WWF in 1989. I saw him at a Legends gathering in Philadelphia years later. I asked about Joe, his dad, who was a good friend of mine. "How's your dad?" I asked. "Why don't you call him and ask him?" He shot back. "What are you hot at me about?" He said, "When I left the WWF, I heard you knocked me on TV." "I was told too," I answered. "I didn't care if you left or stayed. All I said was the reason I got rid of you is because you were hard to do business with. I couldn't handle you anymore. You were doing your own thing. It was part of the storyline." That was it. He was upset about it. Curt Hennig is a tremendous athlete. His father, Larry, wrestled as the Axe. I call Irene, his wife, the Battle Axe. I've known Curt since he was a kid. Curt was like a Barry Windham or a Ray Stevens. He has that ability to bounce back in the ring. If he does something wrong, he can easily recover. When McMahon was hyping Eco Pro, a bodybuilding supplement, in the WWF, Curt gave his kid some before a football game. The kid ended up not playing because he had the shits for 4 days and couldn't practice. Hercules Hernandez was a funny guy, but he was always half asleep or into something bad. We were standing outside the airport in Newark, under a partition, waiting for the rental car. Herc was standing under the partition with a chain that he normally wore to the ring around his neck. He had a piece of tape on one side of his head and a cut on the other. He had the tape on the wrong side. He was wearing a World Gym t-shirt with no arms, a pair of shorts, and shower shoes. We were standing there with 5 or 6 businessmen. Herc noticed there was a button that read, "Push for heat." That would make the coils warm up the partition in the winter. Herc looked at the businessman and said, "What happens if you push that for heat? Does a guy come out and pull your tights?" They had no idea what he was talking about. I even managed the Brooklyn Brawler. I really went up in the world. Kenny J must have been sick. His name is Steve Lombardi, and he actually is from Brooklyn. But he had no idea how to be the Brooklyn Brawler. He had jeans and a t-shirt that said Brooklyn Brawler, but they were laundered. I told him, no, you've got to be dirty. I had this idiot crawling on top of the furnaces in the Hershey Park Fieldhouse in Pennsylvania. I told him he had to get dirty, not just regular dirty from the ground, but with soot like he was in the bowels of the buildings and alleys. I tried to talk him into carrying a rat with him, but he wouldn't do that. He wasn't going to go anyplace with that gimmick. He could have been a Brooklyn Rooster for all anyone cared. And what would the brain be without his fans? I called them humanoids. A humanoid is the kind of guy who has a white sock on one foot and a brown one on the other, and thinks he has a pair at home just like them. A humanoid has no fingernails and haircut and angle. One side is higher than the other. He has where he works on one shirt pocket and his name on the other. Usually it's two names like Billy Ray or Bobby Earl something intelligent. In his pocket are 150 pens that don't work. And on his belt around his work pants, he has this round ring with 600 keys on it. Are there 600 people who would give this moron a job, or a key to anything they owned? He goes home to his rented furniture. He sits between the spring and the cat poop on the couch. He watches his old black and white TV set with aluminum foil around the antenna. As he eats his TV dinner and sips on a lukewarm bush beer, his wife looks at him and he looks at her. She looks at the TV and says, "Oh, that wrestling is fake." I also called fans ham and eggers. A ham and egger is the easiest thing to have on a menu. Ham and eggs. They are the easiest things to have and the simplest thing in the world. I never went to places where I was going to be around that many fans. When I had my time off, I went to my own restaurants and clubs and hung out with a different crew, mainly my Indianapolis friends. I didn't hang out with wrestling people. I never had too much trouble. Occasionally, I'd see a few guys who would want to mess with me, but someone would always call security. But in the ring and out of the ring, I'd see violence and a few weapons. In the South, every fan carried knives and straight razors, which I have been hit with for some reason. They would be working with it, whittling or opening up a box. I worked in Jonesboro, Arkansas, in 1965, and the fans would sit there, drinking out of big jugs and holding rifles. In Cleveland, the fans used to take their steel chairs from the stands, fold them, and toss them like frisbees at us. I would confront the promoter and say, "Jesus Christ, they're killing us. How about a little protection?" We couldn't get anywhere with him, so we asked the police, and the promoter told us not to mess with the fans because they paid to get in. Every time some asshole fan threw something, it usually hit someone, but not me. I was in the ring one night in Lafayette, Indiana, when a fan threw a chair in the ring. I learned later on in my career that the first thing to do is grab the chair for 3 reasons. First, if I didn't, it would bounce and someone else would get hit. Second, I had it to fend off other chairs. Third, if that fan got in the ring, he was all mine. I saw this chair coming and, at that time, I didn't know the rule about grabbing a chair. I started running backward, looking over my shoulder as if I'm going to catch it like Willie Mays. I shouted, "A chair." Someone in the ring yelled, "Catch it." I put my hands up, and they went through the rungs. The seat hit me right on the top of the head and knocked the shit out of me. I thought I was knocked out. I had a funny taste in my mouth and I couldn't see. I didn't know that I had to grab the chair, not put my hands up and catch it like a football. In Winnipeg, I was shot one night in the elbow by a pellet gun. There's an old saying in the business, you don't sell a potato. If a mark hits you, you never sell it. I was hit right above the elbow, and it felt like someone took a hot needle and stuck it in. After I was hit, someone yelled at me not to move and sell it. I think I had an accident in my trunks. Then again, fans can also be overly friendly. Jay York, who wrestled as the Alaskan, was 280 pounds and had this big beard. He was working one night, and there was a male fan in the front row wearing women's ski pants, high boots, a mink stole jewelry, and his hair done up. The guy ran to ringside, got up on his tiptoes, and shouted to Jay, "Scratch him, Alaskan, you big walrus, you." In those days, a lot of people believed wrestling was real. If you were a real no-good, dirty guy in a 3-on-1 situation, that got heat. You could have heel against heel, and whoever I managed was a bigger heel. Nowadays people don't care. They just like the action. My first time at Madison Square Garden was scary. I got there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the fans were packed outside the entrance, pounding on the cars. I was managing Paul Orndorff one night. As I was sitting at ringside, I noticed this guy sitting at ringside with a sledgehammer. I called a cop over and said, "Get this son of a bitch out of here." The fan said, "I work here. I'm going to take the ring down when it's over." Not only was it hard getting out of the ring sometimes, it was hard to get out of the building. In the garden, we'd have to get there early, but there was no place to park inside, so we would always take a cab. But if we were on last, we were in pretty bad shape because there were no cabs waiting outside. The door we came out of was on 33rd, between Broadway and 9th. Both Broadway and 9th had a mess of people because both streets were one-ways. But there was an ambulance at the garden. We would each give the driver $10, and he'd drive us to the Ramada at 49th and 9th where we parked our cars. The guy would make $100 every time. He would turn the lights and sirens on. Everyone back away. Ambulance, he'd shout. When I would work in Houston, Texas, this one old lady would always come there and sit ringside. This woman would curse at me like a drunken sailor or a member of a wrestling locker room. I had never heard talk like that in my life. She'd call me every filthy name in the book. Miss Texas of 1911 would always spit at me, but one night, her teeth followed the spit. The plate landed in the ring, bounced like a hockey puck, and landed by me. I walked over to where they landed, looked at her teeth, and looked at her. Then, I cocked my right leg as if I was going to stomp her teeth. Like a heel wrestler begging off from a babyface, the foul-mouthed woman started pleading with me. Please, please. Bobby. Please, I'm sorry. At least I think that's what she said. It's hard to understand an old woman with all the teeth out of her head. It's like talking to a prune with eyes. Feeling nice, I kicked her teeth back to the now kindly old woman. She picked them up, shook them, and put them back in her mouth. She then turned on me and continued to call me every filthy name you can possibly imagine. And I understood every word. Sometimes, fans decide to be a little more confrontational. Some people are tough. You just never know. When a fan would jump into the ring, I would try to nail him as quickly as I could. I didn't want to have to rely on the babyface to help me. The babyface would say, "Let me have him," and then he would accidentally elbow the guy in the face or step on his ankle. That is, unless I was working with Brad Reingens, who decided to hold me for the marks coming in the ring. When I confronted people as a manager, I used to pick out one guy. Keep in mind, I used to do that. One night in Hammond, Indiana, this huge guy with no neck who had to be an ironworker started walking toward the ring. He shoved the cop away. I yelled at him, "Get in here." The guy walked up to the ring, grabbed it, and curled it. Blackjack Lanza said, "If he gets in the ring, he's all yours." I would often wrestle at Buck Lake Ranch in Angola, Indiana. It was like a western ghost town where they lifted a rock at 8 o'clock and the fans came out from underneath. One night, I was thrown out of the ring. An old mark walked up to me and tried to kick me in the balls. I grabbed his foot and tried to kick him in the balls. Just as I was about to connect, our knees cracked together. He limped back to his seat, and I limped back to the ring. Lanza shouted at me from the ring, "Get in here before you get killed." A more memorable night at Buck Lake Ranch resulted in a riot. Blackjack Lanza and I wrestled the Bruiser. The midgets were also on the card. We wrestled on this outdoor stage that was painted like an old western town where they did shows. As I was sitting on a chair next to the ring, I heard this whizzing sound past my head. Fans were throwing rocks and lighters so hard that they would stick to the back of the set. Moose Kalak was standing outside eating popcorn. At some point in the match, Bruiser was supposed to be in trouble because of Blackjack Lanza. He would yell, "Help me, Moose." Moose would run in the ring, make a comeback on Jack, and we'd split. The problem was that Bruiser didn't sell anything that Jack was throwing at him. Moose didn't want to go in the ring. Bruiser started yelling, "Hey, Moose." Moose looked at the people and yelled, "Let's get him," and waved for all the fans to run to the ring. The fans rushed the stage and the shit was on. Moose was trying to grab me, and I'm trying to hit marks coming at me. Even Bruiser was trying to step on a mark's foot or ankle, desperate to keep them out of it. We made our way back to the dressing room. People were outside riding, and there was no way we could get out of town. The cops were county sheriffs with cowboy hats and blackjacks, but no guns. They finally found a crop duster truck, and we drove away from the arena with the fans waiting in their cars. My car wasn't parked there. It was parked 2 miles away at a Phillips 66 station. I got a ride to the arena from one of the boys and always got a ride back. I never wanted my car where the fans could cut my tires. The crop duster truck dropped me off, and I got in my 1968 Chevy Nova with Lanza. The people were still following us. I drove to the interstate to go back to Indianapolis, and I had the Nova wide open, doing 90 miles per hour with the marks right behind me. Roger Littlebrook, one of the midget wrestlers, pulled up next to me in his car. "You've got some problems, mate," he yelled. "I know," I shouted. "Go off on the next off-ramp, drive over the road, and get back on the interstate. I'll block the road for you." I turned off on the next ramp with Littlebrook and about 35 other cars right behind me. I drove across the street and back onto the interstate. Littlebrook got on the ramp, turned his car sideways, and jumped out. This midget, who is 3'1", was ready to fight. The fans stopped, got out of their cars, took one look at him in his fighting stance, and laughed. Johnny Valentine had a creative way to protect his car. One night, we were wrestling in Chicago. We were looking out the window to see about 10 rough-looking teenagers outside near all the cars. Johnny yelled, "Don't touch my fucking car, you little bastards," and walked away. I looked out the window and they were standing on the car, jumping up and down on it and kicking in the windows. I yelled for Johnny to come over. "Johnny, come here. Look at what they're doing to your car." He smiled. "That's not my car." I learned that when I parked my car, I would put my bag on the car next to me. I'd shout at the fans to get the hell away from me and not to touch my car. When the night was over, that car would have slashed tires or no tires at all. I walked out to the ring one night with Lanza in front of me and Mulligan behind me. If a mark grabbed you, you never turned to him because that would leave your back open to other people. You just kept going. That was the rule. If they didn't knock you down, you kept going. A little guy charged me once and Mulligan, who had played for the New York Jets, tried to block him, but the fan got around him. I told Mulligan later, "You should write a book called, I'm the Reason for Namath's Knees, because you let everyone get through you." This guy hit me with a ball-peen hammer on the top of my head. It didn't hurt. But when I brushed my hair back and looked at my hand, it was full of blood. The police brought the guy into the dressing room and held him up against the wall. They said, "Go ahead." I took off after him and, just as I cocked my hand to punch him, Dusty Rhodes kicked the guy in the balls. He dropped to the ground, and I hit the cement wall. I told the cops, "Get him out of here before he kills me." Boston was a violent town. Gorilla Monsoon was refereeing a match between Blackjack Mulligan and Pedro Morales. Mind you, if you take Gorilla's glasses off, he can't see how many people are in a room. A fan jumped into the ring with a stiletto and stabbed Mulligan up the leg. Mulligan reached out for the guy but got cut up the arm. Monsoon, blind as a bat, grabbed the guy and threw him out of the ring without knowing that the guy cut anybody. We took Mulligan to the hospital to get sewn up, but his cut became infected. The fan had dipped the knife in pig fat. It took 100 stitches to close up that leg. The Boston fans would throw frozen hard-boiled eggs in the ring. They could pick you off at 500 yards. The management put a plastic shield around the ring. The fans got more creative, with one of them throwing a trumpet in the ring. They put a screen net over the ring, but no one could outsmart the Boston fans. They started throwing big, 20-penny nails. But nails, trumpets, eggs, and ball-peen hammers were nothing compared to what happened to me in 1975. I was managing at the Chicago Amphitheater when a fan actually shot at me with a gun. Vern Gagne, the AWA champion at the time, was wrestling Nick Bockwinkel. The match came to the finish, and I was outside the ring. Nick picked up Vern, slammed him, and covered him. The referee counted 1, 2 on 2. Vern put his foot over the ropes to break the count. Naturally, the referee didn't see it and made the 3 count. The people thought there was a new champion. I acted as if there was a new champion. Nick and I jumped up and we hugged each other. I was on the apron. He was in the ring. Suddenly, I heard these 2 pops. In those days, people used to break plastic cups with their feet all the time, so I didn't think much of it. The referee saw Vern's foot on the rope, and he called for the match to continue. We didn't notice what was going on. Vern dropkicked Nick in the back and into me. I fell to the floor. Nick landed on his back, and Vern covered him for the pin. After the match ended, Nick and I started to walk back to the dressing room and there was no heat. No one was booing. Everyone was real quiet. We got to the dressing room and Ray Stevens was waiting at the door. "Are you all right?" he asked. I was confused. "Do you mean?" He told us 5 people were shot. Apparently, when I jumped up to the ring apron after Nick pinned Vern, this fan weighing about 250 pounds and wearing a fur coat said, "I'll get him down." He had a gun, put his hand on the shoulder of this kid sitting next to him, fired the gun, and deafened the kid. He shot only twice, but the bullets went through 5 people. They all recovered. The bullets never made it to ringside, just to the people near the ring. No one testified against him. He even came to the matches after that, but he never did anything after the shooting. It was a while before I was involved in finishes or anything in Chicago. I was really concerned. I would come to the ring, but I wouldn't trip anybody or jump up to the apron. I was just there. That experience scared me. This is the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this program. Please like and subscribe. Comments help the algorithm. See you next time.